Alrighty, so here we are. Got my Ada Wong Resident Evil 4 shirt on today, and so the reason I haven't been uploading videos recently is because I've been working a lot, and one of the things I've been doing is teaching Python, tutoring Python. Now, an interesting thing happened recently where I came into a practical session and there was just no code for the week. There was no code. So I figured I would improv, and I got the students and I said, all right, let's do Pygame. Never seen it before, I'm like, let's do it. Now, but once I got into Pygame, they seemed really receptive to it. It seemed very simple. And so I've actually got a week off now. So I thought I'd take this week and develop a really simple video game with a framework built on Pygame, which I've also mostly made. And let's see how this goes. I know I look really tired right now. I was up till midnight last night putting together assets, collecting sprites, sound effects, that sort of stuff. And I'm now up at 6 a.m. I got up a little, like 5:30, something like that. You know, it's all well and good. Work-life balance, blah, 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 work-life balance. It's game development time, as if I'm going to pay attention to that. Who cares, really? So, the concept that I'm coming up with is very original, I know. It's Mario, but it's going to be Alice in Pythonland. So, I'm going to go grab some coffee, then I'm going to go head in to my office and work. Alright, so here we are, end of day one. Today I just wanted to focus on getting the core classes all planned out, because I'm doing this exercise for an engineering class, so I figured I'd go through proper process. We've sort of got two main packages. One is our support package, and the other is all the stuff specific to our game. So if we go into support, we have a number of systems, and we can sort of see this on this plant UML diagram on the left. So first we have all the event stuff. An event object could really be like a tuple of data. It's very, very simple. It just describes sort of what happened, which sort of object triggered the event, and if need be, has a reference to the instance which triggered that event. Then we have a base class which describes any sort of object which can produce events and can also listen for events. So we have the ability to publish an event that just appends the event to this collection of event queues, and we can add observers, get events, do all this event sort of stuff. The next simplest package after that is the audio package. So we just have this singleton class because I don't want to mess around with initializing and then deinitializing an audio player. I'm just going to have a single audio player for the whole game. And here it is. We have we keep track of the current music track that we're playing. We have a collection of sound effects which can be set off according to different events which occur. We have the ability both to load and unload files. And yeah, all these files need to be in WAV format, but that's no problem. I can convert that ahead of time. Then let's go to view. So view, basically one really important thing is every view class has a screen that it draws to. We've got some other resources that we can load and unload. So we have these load and unload functions, and we also have some helper functions to draw various things. Okay. Then we have the controller, and the controller holds a reference to a clock in order to control the frame rate, keep it at 60 frames per second. Apart from that, we have a bunch of virtual methods which we are going to need to override when we inherit from the class, but they just give us little hooks that we can use to implement various bits of functionality. Now on to, starting to get a little messy with the lines here, but that's fine, the model. So everything sort of starts with a rectangle. A rectangle is super simple, has a center position and then a size. And we can do things like move a rectangle. We can check if a rectangle overlaps with another rectangle. We can check if a rectangle contains a point. Now, inheriting from rectangle, we have an entity. And an entity is basically a rectangle, but it also keeps track of which type of object it is. And it has some other methods. And then keeping track of that is an animated entity, which, yeah, in addition to all the other stuff, also has an animation, so an animation frame and that sort of stuff. Then we have this button, and this is a little bit funky with the lines here. It's a little hard to read, but the button inherits from entity, and it also inherits from observable, because when we click on the button, we want to be able to publish an event to say, hey, this button was clicked. But yeah, so we have that. And then things get a little trickier, and I am anticipating that this last bit will be where most of the performance hit and most of the edge cases are tied up, and that is this bounding volume hierarchy and entity group. So maybe some people are watching this who don't know what a bounding volume hierarchy is. A bounding volume hierarchy is a data structure that makes it really quick to determine, like if I've got a rectangle and I want to see if that rectangle intersects with any of a whole bunch of other rectangles, it gets logarithmic time to detect a collision, which is really, really good. There are just some tricks to be careful of when to rebuild a bounding volume hierarchy, because that can be a bit of an expensive operation. So hey, let's see how we go with this, but I am anticipating that I'll need to change this a little bit, but I think this is enough to start with. So the basic idea for gameplay, just so this whole entity group thing makes sense, is we'll have like a group of enemies, a group of blocks that we can step on, that sort of stuff, and we'll just want to quickly check, hey, is the player colliding with any enemy? Is the player colliding with any block? Something like that. Cool, so that's what we've got in terms of our, basic support code, our core of our engine. But then inheriting, hooking into all of that is these other classes. So we have our core game up here. This is our package. It's got all our game stuff. And then we've got three main stages. We've got the intro stage, where we just show a logo. Then we go into the menu stage, where we'll have like a button to play a game, a button to quit. And then we'll have the game itself. Now, I haven't really gone through all my assets yet. I think that will be tomorrow's focus, will be organizing my assets. So I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to have in my game, but at the very least, something like this. And again, I'm not entirely sure which attributes I'm going to put in which class, but I'm thinking this is how it's going to break down. What I'm going to do, tomorrow I'll do the assets, and then after that I will get into programming it, and then I'll have some better idea of how things are going to split up. But yeah, so that was day one. We've got a nice messy diagram, and we'll see how it goes. Alrighty, so end of day two. What do we have? Well, like I said, the first thing I was going to do is I was going to collect some assets. So here I've got a bunch of music tracks, and yes, I am using the American McGee's Alice soundtrack for the music and the sound effects, because it's Alice in Pythonland, why not? And I've gone ahead and collected a bunch of sound effects. We have the Alice character, Grim character, you'll see that in a bit, and a zombie. Then in here we have the sprites. And I think I am going to do a little bit of further modification on these. So for instance, if we open up, well, I mean, this is transparent, so you wouldn't see it. But if you look at these icons, there's a whole bunch of padding around these sprites. I'm going to see if I can automate the process of removing that padding. But anyway, I've got the assets. They're ready to go. And the other thing I did today is I set up a to-do list. And yes, I'm using JSON for all of these, because if I use JSON, I get folding abilities. There we go. There's quite a bit here, but I really am going the engineering route of defining everything before I do it. A lot of this is sort of like these game phases are basically Kanban style, like agile style. So it's a bunch of user stories like, hey, you know, given that I start up the game, I see the logo animation and things like that. Then I have individual tests, especially, this is a big one, the entity group. So remember yesterday I was saying we had that, well, I said bounding volume hierarchy, but this is a bounding area hierarchy. It's more like an R tree, just a recursive spatial data structure. Doesn't matter, I'm going off on a tangent. But the thing I identified yesterday is there was a lot of scope for like errors. So I'm going to try to test this independently, make sure that the thing is working before I progress and make the rest of the program. But as far as like what needs to be done tomorrow, I'll go top to bottom, but probably these first two items are going to take the most time, especially the map editor. Like I've got map editors that I've used for other projects. I think I'll just take that and adapt it. But there are some big things that I want to do, specifically around commands and undoing and redoing commands, because that's going to make this a much more user-friendly, serious editor program. And then other things like, you know, control click, command click to select groups of objects and things like that, just quality of life stuff. So this is something which will either be really quick and easy to implement, or it will take way longer than I think it will. So I think that's a good thing to start off with. And yeah, I'm just going to go top to bottom. So at this stage, where I'm at with the project is I have all of the assets. I have things more or less planned. I just need to execute. So yeah, that's it for day 2. Okay, so no fancy intro this time, but we're here. I'm recording this at the start of day 4, reporting on day 3. So I had 2 things that I was focusing on. I wasn't sure how much I was going to do. Turns out I got quite a bit done. So the sprite cropping, I just had a function that looked through the image directory recursively and attempted to crop out any empty space. That basically worked. That's fine. Map editor, I would say, fingers crossed, is complete. It's definitely complete for today, for now. Interesting thing is I had a lot of extra features that I was going to bring in, like selecting multiple objects, undoing commands, stuff like that. And I just sort of got the map editor to a point where it worked, and then I decided I wasn't going to implement those features because the purpose here right now is speed. So here's where I am at. I've got my editor, looks pretty similar. It's basically the editor that I used originally for Knack, but we can just go in and load a level. So here's a test map that I did up, and we can see it there. You know, everything works really well. Now something which is very interesting, this is a new feature that I implemented, is if I get an object, like let's say a zombie, right? Here's my zombie. The zombie, it's hard to exactly place the object, right? To get them like sitting on the ground. So what I could do is I could try to place the zombie, you know, here and they'd be hanging around in the air. But I added a feature where for some objects, if they are an object that would naturally sit on the ground, I can actually place the object a little bit into a block and then it automatically detects. Let me just go. Yeah, it automatically detects where the ground level is for that object and it snaps. So anyway, I'm really happy with that. So I would say the map editor is done, definitely for now. And today's task will be to start working on some of the systems. So the audio system, the intro, the menu, I reckon these should be pretty doable. Okay, see you soon. Okay, so we're now a little bit later in day 4. I've got the intro stage and the menu stage both done. Now, for reasons unknown, this is going to mess up the audio, so I'm just doing my talking now, and then I'm just going to adjust the audio settings and then go for it. Okay, and there we have it. So that's where we are, day 4. For the rest of the day and tomorrow, I'm going to start working on the components of the game. Specifically, I really think the collision acceleration structures are going to be an issue. Anyway, we'll see how we go with that. Okay, so day 5, and my focus today has been the R tree, the BVH, the recursive data structure. So here I've got a bunch of blocks and we can see that I can, very efficiently sort of detect which block is going to collide with the mouse. I can add a whole bunch of blocks and it's clearer how efficient this is. And I can also go ahead and delete a bunch of blocks, and please don't error out. Awesome. So I timed this also, and I'm using a fully naive Python setup, like really bad, like constructing a whole bunch of lists on the fly. But still, a full rebuild of 128 blocks takes about 1.8 milliseconds, which is acceptable for me because I'm going to have a bunch of groups for all the individual object types. So things like physical blocks, like I've got right here, there's going to be heaps of them in the level, but they're only going to be built once. So what was I saying? The set of blocks only needs to be built once when we build the level. And then the thing that I really need to worry about is the moving objects, such as projectiles, enemies, all of that. And in that case, there's definitely going to be less than 128 of them, which is perfectly fine. So there we have it, day 5. Pretty happy with that. Okay, we're ready to go with the final product. Now, unfortunately, there's a bit of a mismatch with the sound, so I'm just going to sort of play this and then talk. So let's play it.
Wonderland. Where are you now? Mushrooms, puppies, sugar and spice, all those things are very nice. When combined with the elixir makes a getting small elixir. Don't really like sweets.
Okay, so there we have it. 1 week, and I got something done which is fairly complete and fairly functional. So that's pretty cool. Lessons I learned is, I guess, number one, the code is always going to be weird. I started out with a really well-defined spec and then gradually deviated away from that. That's totally fine. If this were a professional project, what I would then do is I would revisit the spec and I would revisit my code, neaten it up, and make sure everything lines up. But this is probably fine. Other things I would try is data-driven design. It's not data-oriented design, that's a different thing. Data-oriented design is all the entity component system stuff I've been doing on my channel. But data-driven design is the concept that you don't hard code things. You define them in files, and those are common files which can be written to from editors or read by the program. And that's basically all of this stuff. So all of these constants defining all the different types of objects, animations, events, as well as within the classes. Let's go to the game. Things like the size of the objects, could be hard-coded. They could also be defined in files. So that is something that I would like to try in the future. Other things I would like to try is perhaps relying a little more on messaging, the observer pattern, to simplify some of the logic. And here's another thing that I noticed. The code really, I could not be more serious about this. The code needs to be high quality, as in readable, because when I came to work with the editor, to make the editor for this game, I had an editor that I was using previously, which was functional and had more functionality than the editor I ended up going with. But because the code was not well documented, I had to strip out a lot of features like zooming in the editor. Would have been really cool, I just couldn't do it because my own code that I wrote was unreadable. So that would be, I would place a high priority on quality code. But apart from that, I'm pretty happy with this. And I've got to say, it feels really good to actually make something, It feels good to not just be worrying about performance and, is my system the best system? You can always fix it up later. Anyway, so I just wanted to put this out there. I had a lot of fun this holidays. Yes, I only had 1 week holiday, but I will probably do this again in the future. I'm having a think about which projects can I make next time I have some time off, and maybe you can go and work on something and make your own project and have some fun. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's just having fun. All right, so have a good one, and I will see you again soon. Bye.